Hey guys, what's going on? It's Ash here coming at you today with a brand new pro on the channel. Been trying to incorporate new people and new decks, and I know you guys are really going to enjoy this deck brought to you today by Wings. Wings, welcome to the channel, man. How you doing?
What's up, man? Happy to be here.
It's happy to have you on, man. Before we get into the replays, let me just go ahead and ask you a little bit about your Clash history. We should probably go over why I have you on, or how I kind of noticed you and you kind of noticed me. Is last season on your sponsored account, if I can pull it up here, where the heck? Okay, you came in 18th overall. Was that the highest you've ever gotten?
Yep, the season before that I got 31st. This season I got 18th. That's
Nice, man. Well, 58, 11 cups, pretty insane. And this is the deck that we're going to be covering today. It's almost a classic deck with the Giant and the Hog Rider, and we're going to talk to you today about why it's viable right now, and even a couple of substitutions maybe if people don't have guards or leveled up guards. But other than that, you know, how long you've been playing? Tell us a little bit about your Clash background, and when you realized that you were a really good player.
So I've been playing since about April of last year, so around a year. I figured out I was good when I reached 3K cups as a level 9, and I was consistently playing players with really high level cards. And I also went into a grand challenge and I went 12-0 with my own deck. Also, I got it with level 6 rares, so that's when I figured out I was good.
Oh, nice, man. Those are all like really good achievements.
Mm-hmm.
So, do you have any, before we hop into this specific deck, I just copied it onto mine so people can see an easier copy here, but any thoughts about the deck? Tell us about the philosophy of it, both offensively and defensively. Like, what are you trying to do? It's a pretty basic deck. You can really use it in Arena 8, 9, and Legendary Arena. So, do you recommend it, first of all, throughout all these arenas and obviously in challenges and tournament level standards? Or is this specifically a ladder deck? Tell us a little bit about the deck and why it's viable in the current meta.
Well, I think it works better in challenges because on ladder, Musketeer can just get fireballed usually if they have a higher level fireball, so that's really bad for you because you want to rely on it on defense. And on offense, you just want to basically play the Giant in the back and support it with Musketeer. And if you have the elixir, you can hog on the same side. But usually I wait till double elixir to hog with the Giant.
Okay. So are you ever playing the Hog? So offensively, obviously, the Giant and the Hog. So talk about like your preference, because it seemed there's two big win conditions. So I mean, obviously, it's reminiscent of the Jason deck from a year ago in that regard. But talk about what are you I mean, are you starting out? I'm playing the first match here that you shared with us. Are you primarily starting out with just a Giant in back of your tower and kind of reacting after that? Or is there a specific offensive push that's kind of your go-to early on in the match before double elixir time?
Well, I usually play Giant in the back and then react to whatever they play with Musketeer and minions.
Okay.
So, yeah, that's basically what I do for my push. So, if I put Giant in the back, I add on a Musketeer to kill their troops. And I usually don't overcommit on the first push. I just want to see what they have. And then I reset, and then I do another Giant. And then I can push based on what cards they have.
Okay, that makes sense. And then you're using the Fireball and Zap, obviously Zap on like Inferno to reset it and on small, skeletons. And you're using the Fireball predictively towards the end of the match? Or talk about when you start to add the Fireball and when you add the Hog Rider into your offensive combinations.
So Hog Rider is a really high DPS, really fast card. So I only add it onto the Giant when either I'm going for a 3-crown or I'm just trying to get a tower at the end of the game. I usually don't play them together until I'm really trying to get a tower. So in the first replay, I knew I could 3-crown him because he didn't really have a good defense against Giant and Hog Rider. So I played him together and there was not much he could do against it.
Okay. Okay, we talked about when you're using both the hog and the giant together, and we talked about when you're using the giant early on in the match. You're being reactive. Especially your very first push, you're being pretty passive, waiting to see what the opponent does. That way you know for predictive plays later on how to react. What about the Hog Rider? Obviously, you're still playing it early on in the match, or during the first 2 minutes specifically. Are you playing it in the opposite lane, or are you just playing it, when your giant isn't in cycle? And do you have a preference early on to start out with either the giant in the back of your tower, or just rushing with the hog to see how they're going to counter it?
Well, I usually play the hog either when they don't have a defense, they just used it on the giant, or if I know I have an advantage, I use hog just to get in some damage. But if I know they have like a building up, I won't use it unless it's Inferno Tower.
Okay, so that actually makes a lot of sense and that's part of the big advantage that you have playing the giant and the hog together, which again isn't a new combination, but it's very good because oftentimes they're going to be using their cannon, their tombstone, their Inferno Tower against one of the two, the hog or the giant, and that leaves them vulnerable the next time. So is this an offensive deck? Would you consider it in a pretty aggressive deck? It's not like the cheapest deck in the world, but because you do have that advantage that you're trying to outcycle their defense or their building, I should say, do you consider it an offensive deck, or are you kind of thinking defense first with this deck?
Initially, you want to play defense, but as the game goes on, you want to get really offensive because there's so much that you can throw at them that they can't really defend.
Okay, now talk about defense a little bit on this deck. I'm by the way, showing the next replay here against Mini Minter, who I've had on the channel just last week, and he's a beast too. And he finished, I think, around top 30 as well last season. So this is probably going to be a really good replay to watch for folks who want to see it against another pro player, a really good player. Not that they're not all good. But talk a little bit about defense again with this deck. Obviously, you do have a variety of defensive tools, including the guards, the minions, and your direct damage spells, and so on. So talk about what is your defensive philosophy with this deck, and what cards are you kind of holding back depending on what type of deck you're going against?
So it depends. If they have like a golem or a giant, I usually put giant in the back to tank for like musketeer minions. So usually I don't push with the giant. I use it on defense to tank, just like soak up their defense, and then I just kill their tank and then kill their supporting troops after.
Okay, so against a really heavy beatdown, because golem decks are out of control right now in the game. So that's what you're doing. So when they play the golem, as soon as you see them play the golem, you're playing your giant if you have it in hand, or does it depend on elixir as well, or because you don't have a structure in this deck?
So when they play golem, I immediately go opposite lane with giant, not hog rider, because if I go hog rider, they can just defend it with cheap stuff, and I don't take the tower. But if I go giant, it's really threatening, so they have to defend it, and they usually don't have another defense besides pump.
Okay, so they're going with a big push, and you can see it coming, and then you'll definitely go other lane, but not with your hog, with your giant. That's interesting. So do you back up your giant with minions or musketeer, or is that too large of an elixir investment in the opposite lane push?
No, I just go all out.
Because you do? So you totally rush them?
Yes.
Okay,
I think that's important.
Okay. And what about, there's no elixir pump in this deck. Have you tried this deck with elixir pump, closer to like the Jason variation, or are you just happy with the cost that it is? It's not that high again, so are you pretty comfortable with just running no pump?
I think every card in this deck is just too important. I think pump would just take out another card that's more important.
And this is exactly what you talked about, it being a really close game. And at the very, very end there, you just finished him off with only 276 HP on your tower. You finished him off with that combo that we talked about. So very well done there against Mini.
Thanks.
And by the way, before we get into this last replay, because I do want to have you do kind of a play-by-play, because I just want to get inside your head during one of these matches. But you are from OJ's clan, Orange Juice. Wanted to ask you what it's like being in OJ's clan.
Well, it's not really too competitive, but it's a really nice family, and everyone's really nice in there, and they're really supportive.
Cool. Well, that's good to hear. So I'm going to go ahead and start the very last match. I'm going to pause it right at the beginning so you can catch up to me. So let me know when you're on the loading screen.
All right, I'm at 258.
Okay, I'm going to go ahead and press play in 1, 2, 3. And just talk about this starting hand. How do you feel about this starting hand?
So Giant Musketeer minions. So he plays Pump. I play Giant in the back because with Pump, I know he either has Golem or 3 Musketeers. So with Golem, he doesn't have another defense. So I put Giant in the back to slow roll a push and just to see what he does. So he plays Golem. I just go full out offense right here.
Okay.
Like I said, I put minions in the back because I don't want him to like baby dragon or just get value out of a troop. Like Electro Wizard right there.
Mm-hmm.
I got
yeah, and he's kind of in an awkward.
minions.
You can see how he's in a little bit of an awkward situation because he has your giant kind of beating on his tower. Meanwhile, he can't drop any troops to target your giant. In the meantime, all your troops kill his golem before it can even reach your tower.
Yeah, that's the philosophy that I use.
Very
against
nice,
Golem.
and it's your 12th win in the Grand Challenge too. So it's definitely not against a schlub, you know.
So he pumps right here, and I know he definitely doesn't have 10, so I just go all out on him.
Wow, are you gonna like 3 crown right off the bat here?
No, I don't think I did. I think it's on the next push after this.
Okay, cool. So what would be a bad starting hand with this deck? What would you consider a bad starting hand? Or is it really, it seems like the type of deck that doesn't necessarily have an awful starting hand.
I wouldn't say you really have a bad one. Just depends what they play first. Only bad one I'd say is Hog Giant Fireball Zap. That's the only one I'd say is bad.
And what would you do in that situation? Would you just play Hog? Would there ever be a situation where you just rush a Hog at the very beginning of a match to kind of fix your rotation a little bit?
Only if they're just not playing a troop, and that's the only play I have, but usually no.
Okay. It seems like the Hog is kind of your secondary weapon in this deck versus the Giant. Is that true? Or, you know, how are you playing the Hog in terms of without those big pushes? Are you ever just like, obviously you already talked a little bit about how you're playing the Hog when the building is out of rotation for the Giant, but is there any other time where you're just rushing with just Hog or Hog guards or anything like that, or is that not really this type of deck?
Yes, actually there it is. If they just use Fireball, I'd go Hog Minions, because Hog, it's kind of seems like it's secondary, but actually does more damage to the Giant, so I use it as a pretty good weapon too on offense.
Okay, cool. Well, that was a very convincing win there for your 12th win. Before I let you go, do you have any substitutions that you want to talk about? We talked about the pump and how you really don't need it in this deck necessarily, and we just saw firsthand how you can punish an opponent who has a heavier beatdown deck that plays the pump just by rushing them. So any other substitutions, maybe for guards or maybe even for Ice Spirit if somebody's not in Arena 8?
So I use this deck first with skeletons instead of guards.
Mm-hmm.
I think guards are better, but if you don't have them high enough level, like I don't use this on ladder because my guards are not high enough level, I'd substitute in skeletons. They're cheaper, they cycle really quickly. And for Ice Spirit, it's pretty important. You could use Fire Spirits, I think would be a good substitution, or maybe Log.
Okay, and same thing with Zap is if someone has Log, obviously you still prefer Zap. Can you just talk briefly about the role of Zap and why you prefer it to Log when a lot of players seem to be switching to Log?
I just don't think Log would be as good against Inferno Tower, because if you can't reset it, then your Giant just dies and your whole push is dead. So I think Zap is just too important.
Yeah, and lastly, I always like to ask my guests about common mistakes with the decks that they showcase. So this deck, what would be some common mistakes that you see players using with a deck like this with Giant and Hog Rider?
I'd probably say going too offensive with Giant and Hog, because that can really cost you. Like, you get a lot of damage, but you are really down in Elixir.
Yeah, it sounds like it's definitely one or the other, like you said, until the double Elixir time, or unless you have that situation where you know they don't have a good counter, as we saw before, and they play a really expensive troop.
Yep, it's 9 Elixir push that's all offense.
Yeah, yeah, absolutely. So definitely can be devastating, but can be pretty risky. Any other mistakes that you see, or is that pretty much it?
Yeah, that's pretty much the only mistake I'd see with this
Okay,
deck.
cool, man. Well, thanks again for coming on. Really appreciate it. Where can people contact you, or do you have any shout outs or anything like that before I let you go?
Yeah, my Facebook is Jimmy Wings. I think you can put it in the description or something.
Hmm.
And for shout outs, I'd like to shout out 50 Kings for sponsoring me, and Orange Juice, my clan.
Nice, man. Well, it's been a pleasure having you on. It's definitely a really popular and deadly deck. Congratulations again on finishing 18th last season. Wishing you the best of luck this season, man.
Thank you.
No problem. All right, guys. Thank you so much for listening to this great episode. It was really a pleasure to have Wings on. Seems like a great guy, great player, certainly. And just wanted to give a shout out to my YouTube sponsor, Bren Chong, and a shout out to all of you guys for continuing to support me and my channel. It truly means the world to me, guys. So remember, I got your back, and thank you so much for watching. As always, take care, guys.